Okay. Welcome to the November 20th Joint Facilities Advisory Committee meeting. We are holding a hybrid public meeting which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia per JFAC's electronic meeting policy. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone to our hybrid environment and cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will be run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically using the Microsoft Teams link provided on the JFAC website. Additionally, there is a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. For commissioners who are joining virtually, please keep your camera on for the duration of the meeting. Keep phones and devices muted until you are called upon. For attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed. I will address when it is appropriate to turn it on in a moment. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat should only be used for participants who need technical assistance or for members of the public to request to speak during the public comment period. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public comment periods. Additional notes for JFAC members. If commissioners participating virtually wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of the meeting, please raise the virtual hand in Teams. We will hold public comments periods at the beginning and end of the meeting. Those requesting to speak may do so only during one comment period and will be allotted up to 3 minutes to speak on tonight's agenda items. When virtual attendees are called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon. Lastly, this is a public forum. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. So welcome again. We have a quorum. So if we have anybody participating virtually in numbers, they may participate. First, I'd like to introduce, we have 2 new members. Kurt attended virtually at our last meeting, but at this meeting, we have 2 new members. This is Kurt Schuler and Alex Kumano. Welcome to JFAC. Very happy to have you. So our chair's update this meeting is really to just recognize Steve Young, who this is his last JFAC meeting after serving 4 terms. Yes. Thank you, Steve, the longest serving JFAC member.
The last man standing, sitting, so to speak.
You've been with JFAC from the start, and you've seen it go through many different versions and several different, leadership chairs, and we really appreciate all of your time and energy and perspective that you brought to the commission. So as chair, I say that. And I also have to announce that this is the last meeting for our vice chair, Wells Carroll, who is not renewing his term. His term is up at the end of this month. And we also very much appreciate the work that Wells has done over the last 4 years.
4 years, yeah.
4 years, yeah. And as vice chair, I've always appreciated his perspective, input, advice, and consideration. And I'm, sorry to see you both go. But really welcome to 2 new members, and hopefully we'll have a couple more new members coming up in the next couple of weeks or months. But thank you very much to both of you. Your service has been very much appreciated.
Thanks, Tracy.
Either of you want to say anything?
I'll just say I'll miss everyone. I've learned a lot. It's been interesting, and yeah, after 4 terms, it was definitely time to go. So I'll try to keep an eye on JFAC though from the sidelines.
Thanks for that.
And I'll be keeping an eye too. So mostly I just wanted to thank you all for also like helping me learn a lot over the last 4 years. And thanks in particular to Stacy for her leadership. You've managed to do so much in just the last 2 years. You have guided us through some very contentious issues, things that are matters of big public concern and also oftentimes public debate. And I think that you've kept us, squarely and appropriately focused on what it is that we can contribute as a commission, drawing on our sort of like curiosities and our expertise. And so the ultimate output of the work has been focused. It's been well researched. It's been, as you might say, data driven. And I think it is, thanks to your leadership and your hard work that we've been able to be so productive over the last few years. So let's just say thank you, Stacy,
for your support in that. Working with you has been part of that as well. So thank you, and with everyone. So on that note, do we have any public comment at the beginning of the meeting? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the approval of the meeting minutes. Everyone can get a chance to review the meeting minutes from our last meeting.
Oh, yes, I did read them, sorry.
And any,
I believe.
yeah. Any edits? Any edits?
I removed Kurt's middle name. So, yeah.
Does anyone want to move to approve the minutes as amended?
I can make that motion.
Second?
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Yes.
Okay, so starting with you guys.
Yeah,
Yes.
oh, yeah, oh, all
So-
right, let's do it.
Yeah.
So now we will move to our 3 presentations for this evening. Yeah, we wanted to get 3 because Steve and who else were going to be gone. So anyway, Steve
All right.
and Andy, go ahead.
So we'll take it away. I will sort of lead talking and Andy will kick in at any
Yes.
point where he wants to. So we looked at the Deanwood Community Center in DC. And I'm not going to read all the text, but it was built relatively recently, 2010. It has a lot of interesting attributes. DC obviously is relatively land scarce, like we are, although when I did the numbers, I was a little bit surprised that they have a lot more square miles in DC than we do, which I don't think I had ever fully appreciated. So they actually have more land to work with than we do. In the case of Deanwood, it was kind of strategically positioned. It's adjacent to a 5.8 acre park. There's a nearby metro station. There's a high school, like within a block of the community center.
And an elementary school?
So, but I think the most interesting thing is the Deanwood community was definitely a pretty underserved part of the district. And they kind of strategically did this project with the goal of helping to revitalize the community. And they went fairly high end from what I can tell in terms of everything they tried to do with the facility. And from what I can gather, it's been pretty successful in helping to revitalize Deanwood. It's become kind of a center of community pride, major gathering place for people, a lot going on there, a lot of synergies with other stuff going on. So that's kind of cool. They also were fairly progressive environmentally, and stuff, LEED certification. So Emily, if we can scroll a little bit, it's got almost every use you can imagine going on there, except that there's what they call an early care and education center. It's not obvious that there's any like public school classroom type activity within the facility itself, but it is adjoining, the schools or next to schools that are close by. I don't think it's listed there, but they also have, they have a pool. I mean, there's a lot going on.
Indoor water park, cool for kids. Yeah, I like, Steve was saying, we both scoured the internet trying to find things. I was reading Yelp reviews, Google reviews, trying to figure out what their schedule was. tried to find the funding, which we both couldn't ascertain how it was funded, but I did see that it, DC is a lot, I think, structured differently. They have a mayor, they have council, they have different form of government, but the general services and the Parks and Rec partnered together to build it and manage the programs and facility use and upkeep. So it is a, county Parks and Rec joint venture, and I'm sure, although it's probably locked down for privacy concerns for the schools, I'm sure there are school activities that occur, whether they be practices or games on these fields in adjoining community center. It sounded to me a lot like they built something akin to what exists near Yorktown with that park and the football stadium being on county property or public rec, whatever. So, but being able to be used by the public outside of game times, after school time, stuff like that. So.
And I'd be willing to bet that the high school students, they have a sound recording studio as part of the facility. Willing to bet that at least the high school students probably make a lot of use of that capability. So as Andy said, we couldn't really track down funding, except that the price tag was somewhere around 33 million. That was back, in that circa 2010. So construction costs weren't as high then as they are now. And apparently they did have a couple of funding streams: capital improvement, DC's capital improvement, and a neighborhood revitalization fund apparently for it. Couldn't find any information on a bunch of the other questions. That's what the NIFs mean. We could scroll a little bit more, please, Emily. It looks like, a lot of things that the community was interested in are being addressed by the facility. Initially, I didn't see arts mentioned explicitly, but I've noticed there's obvious sculptures outside the building. We'll see that in a second. So presumably, they have some arts tie-ins as well. Again, we couldn't find information about agreements, particular joint use challenges. I think the last question has there been measurable success? Emily, we could do one more thing. It does sound like it's had a lot of impact on the community, and that perhaps might be of interest to Arlington as we look at portions of Arlington underserved. Not that we aren't necessarily thinking that way. Other interesting findings, lots of sustainability characteristics, water conservation. They looked at the materials they were using for construction and were sensitive about that. At the time, at least, it was the largest rec center in the district. They did do a field upgrade. It looks like they did go with the synthetic turf.
Made from 30% organic corn, which is cool in the summertime.
Yes, with which I've been hearing lately, although I have some questions about that, but I'm not going to.
No, I was like, I'm not sure I should say this sitting right here.
And I threw in a couple of pictures. On the one on the left, you can see the interesting looking sculptures, the sort of orangey reddy things. And it really appears to be festooned with solar. So it looks like they put in a lot of solar all over their tops.
And I read the general services department was bragging on their water conservation as well. When they built the facility and when they redid this field, they're not trapping rainwater, they're preventing it from overflowing, and then seeping slowly into the groundwater. So they've got retention and containment to help mitigate that across the area. Because I'm not exactly sure where Deanwood is, but I know there are lots of different parts of the district have issues with water.
Yeah. It's in Ward 7 Northeast DC. So it's actually just a little bit east of Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens, which a lot of people know, up that way. Yeah, so that's kind of our presentation. If anyone has any questions, please feel free. Probably say we don't know, but
If there was a something that you would like to, something that you found that was interesting in this, that you would like to say, look deeper into on a, is there something that you would say?
I mean, I think it's interesting the time that they built it. In 2010, we're coming out of recession and low point in economics, but the district decided then that this neighborhood needed some TLC, for whatever reason. And it really, 14, 15 years later, has made a positive impact on the community. So I think it's neat to see. I don't know the exact circumstances of what was going on then, but at least, regionally around that time, things were tight. But they still have made this investment and made a lot of public pools. And I've seen DC do this also in near where I used to work. There was a neighborhood that was basically being torn down, and it was just, but they built this amazing community center, and it had a pool almost identical to that one with swimming lanes and an indoor water park for the people that were underserved in the southeast, on the other side of the Anacostia area. So I think DC is kind of like, that's their defense. They try and build these great community centers to try and foster that infrastructure, which I think is neat.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things when I was looking at this project, I think what led me to this project was that DC has a early childhood education initiative. I can't remember what it's called exactly, where they're placing, at child care centers within these community centers, or sometimes within schools. And they also have school-based health centers in their high schools where, high school students can go get healthcare in the school. So, I mean, I thought that was an interesting piece of is there a healthcare?
Let's see that list.
I didn't see health, definitely the early education and childcare component. But I didn't see health specific.
And I think there was, there was a organization that actually was the umbrella over all of the early childhood education centers in DC. But anyway, I mean, that would be something that I thought really interesting.
It's a very fun one.
But I like that idea that it's an underserved community. It's building a community center with needs.
Yeah.
That would actually
consciously and definitely taking a fairly broad brush view of what are the needs? Can we pull more different things together into one facility?
Yeah.
Kind of. So yeah, to me, it was just the missing component was that there wasn't enough public school element to it, but we've already talked about.
But it was close to it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And do they share that park?
I'm sure they do. Yeah. So if I may, I will just throw out, and I warned you, I am aware our neighbors in Alexandria have something that I think is an interesting model. And so I'm just going to mention that, in case there's any interest, I'll be gone, but, further looking into it. And that's the Jerome Buddy Ford Nature Center and the William Ramsey Elementary School, which are basically conjoined, I guess is the best way I would put it, in Alexandria. And that's a case where they consciously sought to, develop that synergy between the elementary school students and the nature center, the sort of nature education and exposure components. And it's also adjoining Dora Kelly Nature Park. So this is another case of a joint use facility that has a park next to it. But I would say it appears to meet the joint use model from the standpoint of public school and other community uses, and it's close enough nearby that if anyone ever wanted to do a field trip, which I did several years ago. And I had a conversation with one of the nature center people a few years ago, and they have had some issues like coordinating, probably not surprisingly, coordinating on HVAC stuff, for example, because they've got different zones, but they're sort of codependent. And just in general agreements about who's responsible for what and that kind of stuff. So just throwing it out there that that's another possible thing to take a look at. That's even closer to us than Deanwood. So I'll stop
All right.
Did you use your JFAC approved budget to go see?
there. Yeah, right.
Tax credit card.
Yeah, it's amazing. They were very impressed when I started waving it around too.
All right, well, thank you both for doing research and looking into that. Wells and Alex, what you guys think?
Actually, I realized I need to make a change to our slide deck. Is it okay if somebody else goes first?
Sure, Kurt? Yeah, are we ready?
Yes.
All right. Kurt and I researched the new Swampscott High School and Senior Center in Scott, Massachusetts. Hi, Natalie. Hello. Slide. Somebody sitting here.
Oh, sorry.
Excellent. This is a picture of it. The high school with the senior center built within the facility. So this it is a joint high school and senior center. It was new construction. The high school has about 650 students, as opposed to around 2,200 that Arlington schools have, and that's probably more in line with the HB Woodlawn school population. But it's only one high school in Swampscott. Swampscott, because Swampscott is not big. It is a suburb of Boston, and it's about 12 miles down outside of Boston. It's right on the water, and it has a population of about 15,000 people. And the land area of the town is 3.5 square miles. So there's not a lot. The population has aged. The number of seniors is about equal to the school age population. And it's actually, if you look at, I have a slide, there's actually more seniors than school age population. If you add in all of the demographics. Swampscott originally had a high school and middle school in one building, built. And then it built a high school in 1950, and the middle school moved into the old building. The middle school moved to the former high school, and the old building was put to market for redevelopment. So this is the Swampscott's population. So it is according to the population in the 2020 census. It was around 15,000, and then in 2030, it's projected to grow 15,529, and then in by 2030, it's expected to grow to around just a little bit, 15,735. So not huge growth, but still some growth. And if you look at the population by age, you see that the biggest percentage of the population is age 45 to 54. 5 through 19 is pretty even, with the 65 to 74 is also pretty big, and then 75 to 84 and 85 plus are pretty equal to the 5 through 19 numbers. Add them together. So they were, okay, yeah. So they were looking to try to serve that, kind of demographic change. So the facility is a high school and a senior center. The town decided to combine them into a single building. The previous senior center was in an old 3-story building of about 2,000 square feet, and of which only 1 story was accessible to people who could not walk up and down stairs. Didn't make a lot of sense for a senior center.
Wow. It
was also in a part of town where parking was scarce. The new senior center is 7,500 square feet, so more than 3 times bigger. And the high school is 193,500 square feet. The senior center is attached to the high school building, but they have separate entrances. There are areas that can be open for joint use, such as the cafeteria, gym, theater, and computer lab. The town saved money on building costs, operation, and land because in a 3 square mile town, land is also scarce. Building the facilities together. The senior center wanted to relocate. So on the right there, that is a little picture of the house where the senior center was. The town's public schools were overcrowded and a new high school was also needed. The only accessible space was in a windowless room in the basement where staff served lunch, sometimes to only 2 or 3 people, and offered bingo a few times a week. The population of school-age children was close to the population of seniors. Next slide, please. So here's so where the circle is, that's the senior center, and the rest is the high school. Next slide, please. There's a picture of the inside. Next slide, please. So 2 proposals went out to bid, one to build a high school only and the other for a combined high school senior center. The high school cost $54.5 million, which included building 3 tennis courts and 2 ball fields adjacent to the old 1950 high school, now the middle school, to replace those that had formerly existed on the land that became the site of the new high school. So they they built the building on fields and then moved the building, then moved the fields. A state grant covered about 1/3 of the cost. Cost of the senior center was $1.5 million. Combining the 2 projects saved the town between $300,000 and $400,000 by enabling the senior center to use the high school's mechanical, electrical, and water systems. The town paid the full cost of the senior center.
What'd they do with that old building downtown?
Apartments.
Apartments?
Oh, did they?
The state provided a reimbursement grant of approximately $19 million to build a school. Does the joint use save the jurisdiction money? The $300,000 and $400,000 in savings was relatively small to the overall cost of the project, but it was a huge increase in use of the senior center, and the collaboration between the seniors and the students at the high school is, priceless in a way. Okay, next slide, please. Swampscott's population has become older over the years, so the expansion of the senior center has met the need to serve that part of the population better. It is an intergenerational learning center. The Swampscott Senior Center has a living room with a fireplace and 3 classrooms. It can accommodate 90 for lunch as opposed to the 2 or 3 in the basement, and has a health clinic within the facility. Seniors also make use of the high school's dance studio for weekly tap classes. There are programs that allow high school students and seniors to interact and benefit both. For instance, students helping seniors with computers and their phones, and seniors helping students with history projects. Like they'll come in if they're on veteran, like talk about World War II or veterans or Korean War. Students also work with seniors to learn knitting and cooking, and seniors are given free tickets to student performances and games. There's also, next slide, please. This is a picture of the students and seniors displaying a quilt they made together for Black History Month. Isn't that great? Okay, next slide, please. So what kind of agreements are utilized to manage the joint facilities? The senior center did not want to be part of the school budget and asked for its own utility meters to control its own costs and overhead. For natural gas, the bill is divided by square footage for each utility, and there's a separate entrance for the senior center. Oh, there we go. What challenges, if any, have these jurisdictions encountered? The senior center has become so popular that the parking lot is often full. Have there been measurable successes? Yes, the senior center's number of clients has risen to about 1,000 from a few dozen at the old location because it is now completely accessible and because it is a larger space and can offer more services. These numbers suggest that there was a big demand that the old center left unfulfilled because of its accessibility problems. Next slide, please. Other interesting findings. The high school, it was built about 20 years ago, but the recent technology for energy efficiency and building materials, obtaining the land for the high school and senior center was complicated. The new high school was built on town-owned land that contained a park, baseball fields, and a hockey rink, and a forested area. The completed project contained retained some parkland and forested area, upgraded a playground, and added a soccer field and running track. They kind of did a swap. Next. Because of state laws concerning parkland, the state legislature had to vote to allow the town to build the high school on the parkland and replace it by creating a park elsewhere in town. The combined project required special zoning permits from the town. And Kurt found this little interesting bit, which should not surprise anyone in Arlington, but neighbors concerned about traffic and fearing a decline in property values challenged the granted permits in state court. The building committee and architect held monthly, often contentious public meetings with neighbors during the lawsuit. Mediation led mediation led to an agreement which included adding a playground to the high school senior center property. This is so Swampscott. The town of Swampscott has a senior committee, like a schools committee. They have a schools committee, but part of their town is a senior committee. And this is from the website, and that's their mission statement, which is Swampscott for All Ages Committee is dedicated to making Swampscott a more likable, livable community for all. I didn't print this one out, and I'm having a hard time reading.
And bring my glasses.
Here we go. Thank you. Dedicated to making Swampscott a more livable community for all residents to grow up and grow older together. And it also has some visioning statements, that include safe, affordable, well-designed housing that can be adapted as residents age. It's affordable, that advocates for affordable, accessible transportation that allows residents to freely travel around the town, public spaces that are accessible, a wide network of medical and non-medical services that feeding quality of life, and other, a town in which older adults are included and consulted on community projects, planning and initiatives, and all aspects of life. So I thought that was an interesting points. And I think that's it, except for some slide sources. Kirk, do you have anything to add?
What is it? Just trying to emphasize, you know, there was not very much in cost savings, but that the increase, there was such an increase in the senior center that, you know, so that's a non-monetary
Right.
gain.
Sure.
And so, you know, of course, the monetary side was important, but it's, you know, it seems to me in this particular case, it was kind of, it was the non-monetary gain, which was the most important outcome of the project.
So for just that tiny additional increment of cost, they were able to hugely increase the service. Yeah. Which is.
And for their, and for the students in high school too.
That
Makes
that
the
sort of
program richer.
co-benefits,
You have those
right.
first-person sources
Right.
For history, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and here, let me teach you how to knit, and I mean, it's, everybody wins.
Mhm.
I love that picture of the quilt.
I mean, and it's, you know, it's not just the Veterans Day things, like you want to learn about civil rights area, like here's people who lived in the sixties.
Yeah.
And they might have been teenagers or whatever, but like, you know, like everyone here is probably too young to political.
Can you imagine?
But it's a relevant era that is taught in schools, you know, like it's
Yeah.
important to study the civil rights movement. Some people lived it.
Anyway, I think that's,
I had a question about parking. You said that because they had such a increase in usage, did they, you know, and you had that slide of the first floor, did you see anything about like how they
Like a
balance
portion
the
of
parking
yeah.
requests and needs for the school and the neighborhood, you know, not wanting, I assume, parking lots everywhere? I don't know. Parking lot could be a four-letter word.
I did not, look into that.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really show where parking was. I mean, my guess is that they said that they serve like 1,000 seniors a week or a month, you know, as opposed to just a couple dozen that were making use of the former senior center. And, maybe they underestimated the amount of parking that they would need. That's,
I was just curious. It's
Yeah.
not a big deal, really. I mean, and they probably, like DC, have more space. A little more.
oh, well, 3 square miles.
That's the size of the city. Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then I guess it is interesting. I would be interested to.
Yeah.
I'll try and see if I can find info on that. Just.
But they have a senior committee that, that could, maybe is working on having a meeting tonight addressing parking.
Purple, yeah.
Yeah,
It-
carpools and public transportation,
yeah.
yes.
It looks like they don't have a huge amount of parking
There's a lot of solar
overall,
roads.
but there's one lot, kind of
Right there.
a pretty small piece next to that corner.
Where that circle is.
So I guess because space is so tight, yeah. Huh.
Did you send me the new slide?
I did, yes. Yeah, sorry about that. I noticed an inaccuracy. I want to fix that before it goes out.
You know, Andy.
Yeah.
Steve also. Yeah, they already did.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys are doing next.
No, we go next now, look at it, yes.
No, we didn't.
That's what I get for using my.
That's perfect, right there.
The issue is in my section. So.
Oh, yeah. Stacey, I'm probably gonna just
Okay.
say hi.
Oh, yeah. Susan Cunningham, our,
On the phone at some point.
our county board liaison.
Thank you all for being here and for tackling the question. It's actually very exciting. Let's bring out the boards. Appreciate your patience since last year. We will be, and then we'll kind of get going. Thank
If we've got sorry.
you. Please.
We have a moment. We will also, weren't asked to look at public-private partnerships. Are you interested in any of that?
Ours
Or-
is
Oh,
very much
yours
one of
is?
those, yeah.
Oh, because we have an example of that on Wilson Boulevard with the Veterans Building.
Yeah.
Which I'm as a American Legion member, I can talk all about it and how all that's set up. But they have a legal center and a low income housing building that helps 50% is supposed to be for veterans and other.
It's Terwilliger Place, right?
Hmm?
Is that Terwilliger Place?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat. And then, they have Legion functions there too, and the legal outreach with George Mason as a public-private partnerships. Pretty good use of the space.
Is that the one with all those, they have parking issues?
Yeah, they have parking issues.
Big time.
Because as someone who uses the facility, like it's hard to get in
Yeah.
to park. So I just end up.
No, I know somebody who lives right nearby. She says.
Well, the parking garage is, you have to be a resident. So being a guest of the Legion, you have to call and you have to jump through these hoops. So I don't know how parking is otherwise.
She says it's really bad.
Interesting.
It's always a trade-off of cost of building new housing.
Yeah.
versus the parking. So
Exactly.
that is one.
And the
that-
street capacity surrounding it.
There's other.
Right.
Yeah, there were a lot of issues. So it's a relatively new project still. It's definitely a parking issue. It is typical. And one of the things, anytime you're sharing uses, you learn. And so one of the things that the teams that were meeting to talk about that, residents were meeting, was if you drop the parking ratios to have better cost of affordable housing, get more affordable housing, make sure you have an overspill agreement. So like any commercial property in that area would be required. If you can't park everyone on site, do you have an agreement with the church? Or do you have an agreement with another building?
That's right.
Because countywide, we have plenty of parking, but it's not always right where you want it. But that's a good one in Arlington.
Yeah.
It's kind of a bunch of uses right against each other and you feel the pain points. It's the collaboration.
Okay.
And speaking of collaboration, so Alex and I will be presenting on the East Harlem Center for Living and Learning. This was a sort of co-located affordable housing and charter school site in the East Harlem area of New York City. So without further ado, Alex, do you want to take things away?
I'm Alex. Come on again. People I haven't met. Nice to meet you. So for perspective, I don't know how familiar you are with New York, but East Harlem is Spanish Harlem. It's primarily Dominicans, Cubans, Puerto Ricans. It's El Barrio. It's probably the most disadvantaged neighborhood in New York City, and even nationally. We talk about crime rates, infant deaths, STDs, HIV/AIDS, asthma, every basic public health and like quality of life index you can think of. Spanish Harlem struggles in it. And at the time in 2015, there was rapid gentrification happening in all of Harlem, but even there. And primarily the housing stock at that time was those really tall, dense 1940s, 70s public housing units that you've been to New York, you've seen them, or very expensive row homes being built and redeveloped. At the time, they hadn't built a new public school in this part of town in 50 years. So the city was looking for, affordable housing and educational solutions for the neighborhood. There was a 5-acre tract of land that was used as a trash compactor and just spilled over a parking lot for the New York City Housing Authority. So they came up with the very creative idea of having very, attractive compared to like what else you would find there, affordable housing units and a K-8 charter school. It was built in 2015 on 5 acres of land. It has, next slide. 89 affordable housing units, Yomoto apartments. The K-8 charter school is 54,000 square feet. It's ran by the Dream Charter School. So Dream is a local charter nonprofit. They started as Harlem RBI. They would go around Harlem and develop baseball fields. And then in 1991, they started working out of whatever space they could, setting up charter schools. But now they have 3 fully functioning charter schools throughout New York City, co-located with like city buildings. $100 million budget, thousands of kids in their purview. They serve legitimately 100% of their population. Their schools are Black and Latino, almost all under the low income economic line. 25% of their students are physical or mental disabilities. So they picked a very, very good and reputable charter school to partner with. It's a U-shaped building, so in the middle there's a new park that they redeveloped that's open to the public as well. It's shared by the school and the apartments. It was an $84 million project. 24 million of that was the school cost, which came out of the city capital budget, I believe, and the rest we'll go into later. It's an amalgam of different type of funding sources for the apartments. Next slide, please. The Yomo Toro apartments, they had 77,000 applicants. I think a lot of the kids that go to the school live here. Even a lot of the faculty live here. 11-story affordable housing. You can see it's definitely with a tilt towards family housing or multifamily housing, which is consistent with the living patterns of the neighborhood. Having lived in a multifamily Latin household myself, that's definitely tracks.
How do the kids get, if they're living there, then they get priority? Is there a list? How does that work?
No, it was a lottery for.
So it was a lottery for all the kids for the charter school?
Yeah.
Huh.
It's again, it has a lot of amenities that you'd expect in a building, even here: exercise room, terrace, laundry facilities. And you'll see the renderings. It's very attractive building and much needed in the area. The next slide, please. So it's 450 students across K through 8, which is big drop off from like the nearby public school as far as like students per class, teachers per class. And I think I spoke a little bit about the company itself that runs the charter schools. Next slide.
So is the charter school in the area, is it like a public zone school? So like if you live in the neighborhood, you're zoned to go to the school, or is it?
No,
It's a lottery. Okay.
and so is
But it's private. Okay. It's definitely private.
Or it's like
getting
a-
public funds.
It's public, yeah.
it's a nonprofit that runs.
But it's still private because we don't have them.
Right. Next slide.
Yeah, so that you can get at least a sense of the sort of school layout. They kind of built it around a gym in the center, and then with like a lot of classrooms surrounding it, and also on top. Let's go to the next slide. So it serves, as you could probably guess, a wide variety of community needs. So this is New York City in what was 2015, what is now 2024. Where housing has gotten even more expensive, where there's been tremendous gentrification pressure throughout the city, and particularly even in areas like East Harlem, as Alex spoke to. And so the committed, what we call committed affordable homes, but these sort of like guaranteed affordable homes for people at 60% of area median income or lower, were a much needed addition to the neighborhood. Another is public education. So we don't really have a charter system here in Arlington, but they are quite common in New York City. And one of the questions was would the joint usage itself save money? And the answer here is well, maybe, especially if you consider the fact that building the school anew would have cost, you know, the New York City Department of Education quite a lot of money, like tens of thousands or to tens of millions of dollars. Whereas the sort of public-private partnership aspect meant that and really mostly private aspect, meant that the project's developers were able to access private capital in addition to, you know, your typical kind of suite of grants, low-income housing tax credits and the like, in order to make the project pencil out. Also, as Alex mentioned, this is a very high needs community. And so, you know, the addition of, you know, a charter school facility, even though the school itself kind of moved from next door into this one, you know, better positioned to serve those needs. And he, you know, as he said, this is, I think that the first new school facility that had been built in East Harlem in like many decades, which is just kind of shocking. But that's kind of commensurate with the overall trend of New York City, where it's very, very hard to build anything. Land is even more scarce there than it is here. And so, you know, especially for like stretched school budgets and the like, there's more of a pressure just to kind of keep the facilities as they are and maintain them to kind of meet a minimum standard as opposed to building anything new here. And so, as Alex said, this law presented just a prime opportunity for taking something that was dramatically underused, you know, as like overflow parking and a trash compactor for ones that have a lot of community benefits.
Well, as you mentioned, private capital. So what was the equation for that sector? What was the payback that they were expecting if they were investing in this?
It's a good question, and I realized that like Alex had prepared a slide on this that I left out. So sorry about that. But you know, you can speak to the financing, but there was a lot of there's a lot of private financing that went into it.
Yeah, I don't have the details of the actual terms. But let me go back to the slide that I had written up and I'll try to answer in a few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, that just kind of caught my ear. It's curious about what their thought process was. Was it basically pro bono and they were expecting, you know, a return, you know, how that would work. So,
I guess as a one combo, like the affordable housing would be like an APA project or two round project here. And then charter school group had Civic Builders is the group that does a lot of the charter schools in New York City. And so they had a capital stack as well, some of which would have been state funds, some local funds. So it's a little bit like affordable housing where there's like a stack of a bunch of different
Exactly.
pieces. So they're not like go to the bank and get a loan kind of thing. They're subsidized across.
And so we go to the next slide. This talks a little bit about the various agreements involved. So if we understand the usage to be divided up into the housing piece, the education piece, the school piece, the developer who kind of oversaw the entire project continues to own the housing units and then lease them with the sort of affordability guarantees. So my own research, like, it didn't say expressly whether there's any kind of set aside for the charter school community. It sounds like, Alex, through your research, you kind of said, well, no, they're sort of independent lotteries for both of them.
I saw they were like 200 out of the 450 students are residents. So that's a fair chunk.
Yeah, it's pretty high number.
30 the staff.
Okay. So about,
Quite a bit.
Which is pretty great. Like in a place like New York, being able to, like walk to school without crossing the street. It's
Huge.
it's
Work
ideal.
at school without having to commute.
Yeah.
That's fine.
yeah.
And then the school itself was, I think, it purchased the land for the school site, transferred the land kind of back to New York City, and then got the sort of extremely favorable leaseback terms. One of those like 99-year dollar per year leases. And so in that sense, it sort of ended up being a kind of win all around. And so if we go to the last slide, this really just kind of recaps the sort of community benefits that we kind of talked about before. I guess one thing to emphasize here is that the joint use made it sort of possible to kind of get more stakeholders involved in the project. So this wouldn't just be a trash compactor converting into a single apartment building or or parking lot converting into a school. It was sort of like, these things converting into one big site that helps get kind of more support, because I think it's a project where, like, I think to the public and especially to the people who financed it, the whole was greater than the sum of its parts. The fact that, like, yes, so like a new affordable housing projects, great, new school project, great, but you put them together, and then all of a sudden, I think that's one of the things that got the project through, despite the sort of complexity of managing, both like the construction of a school and of an apartment building, both of which will be managed separately and even owned separately, is the fact that the combined use really just like hits the ear nicely and gives people good feelings, and frankly, it should. So,
There's two needs. I mean, it meant
yeah,
not just one need and then left the other need unattended.
right.
It's, actually meeting the needs of the entire community, more of the community than just if they had just built one.
The cost does not seem all that high for New York City, frankly.
I mean, these are 2012, 2015 dollars. So, but even still, it's like, yeah, exactly.
Give her what they got out of it.
Yeah. Well, I think part of what helped is that the land acquisition cost was not nearly as high as it sort of could have been, had it been located maybe in a different part of the city, or had to be like a very complex demolition relative to like land use that was already taking place there. So if they had to say knock down like a mid-rise or apartment or office building, that could have, even just the acquisition and demolition cost there could have set the project like much higher.
To answer your question, an NGO based in Maryland actually called Enterprise Community Development. They're a CDFI, so it's Community Development Financial Institutions. They got a low income loan through JP Morgan, like low income housing loan through JP Morgan. They also took out 2 mortgages directly from the New York Housing Authority. So a mixture of funds, but it was a private organization partnering with the city to develop the apartments.
And the city, various departments pitched in money too.
A councilwoman as well from, I guess, her like block of funds, grant towards this. And it looks like they're a CDFI that does this all up and down the East Coast. Revenue is quite high, so they're definitely getting a return on their investment.
It's interesting to me when I think about a certain 40-acre site in Arlington, the fact that this is overflow parking and a trash compactor. And I think about the Trade Center and, the inefficient utilization, I would argue, of that very large, start to think about what you could possibly do. That'd be more visionary, meet a whole bunch of uses, and actually maybe even be attractive to some of the nearby residents who aren't necessarily fans of what's happening. So, yeah, that's very interesting.
Right? Anybody have any other questions or thoughts?
It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys, I will ask you guys the same question that I asked Steve and Andy. If you think that there was any aspect that if you had to take another stab at researching this, would you, what would you want to look into more? Was there something that this led you down a path that you said, oh, I think this is really interesting, but it's kind of getting off course here? But it's JFAC relevant.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Alex. I will say for my part, I'm still fascinated by the how of it, like how they got a project with this many sort of stakeholders, various city departments, financiers, charter school, the housing authority, like just how they managed to kind of navigate through all of that. Because I'm not an expert in researching sort of New York municipal procedures. Like it's taken me years to get at least like halfway decent at just figuring out what's going on in Arlington at a given time. And then New York City was completely inscrutable. And maybe it was more practice, but just the ways in which the developer was able to kind of keep this moving. But it does seem like, based on just the many, many, glowing press releases that got kind of issued between when the project was first kind of conceived and put forward in 2012 to when it finally broke ground in about or opened in 2015. I think the fact that like it was so popular and had so many people interested in making it happen, that whatever issues came up, that there was at least the sort of shared incentive to work past it and make it happen.
And they put so much thought and attention to how the building looked. And I thought for that community specifically, that was well intentioned and well thought out. 'Cause there's a sense of community pride to live somewhere that's attractive. It looks different than the other places. I like that. Obviously Harlem and New York are just so different than Arlington. And New York, it's so common to have a high rise of their public or affordable housing. It's obviously a little different here. But I have never heard or seen anything like that. I'd love to know how you even found this place. It's interesting.
I think I found this one because I did a joint use public housing, and there was, Alexandria was considering adding an element that would allow public housing to be built on school sites. And they went to the presentation and they listed several examples of where I can send you the link, several examples of where public housing and schools were, or public housing was on a shared site or in a shared building. And I sent that list to Wells and said, let's do this one. Looks interesting.
I was disappointed to see that Alexandria did not move forward with.
Oh, so it didn't pass.
No.
Okay. Because they were not ready to go.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Do they have a seats need in their school? Like they need more buildings?
They're having to break up their high school across several different campuses. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I don't think, they're in a different situation. Are kind of in other ways, but would you, if we took another stab at doing these joint use projects, would you want to look at, try to look at another example of housing and school? Yeah, because it does seem to be that there's needs several important needs and.
The big question for Arlington is the sort of school piece, the kind of highest and best use there.
Yeah.
Just given our projections. So that's why housing plus senior center.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, and there's synergies there too, right?
Yeah.
Like the idea that especially if you have housing that's has a certain kind of percentage of accessible units. Yeah. That's elevator accessible. And has to be connected to a senior center, kind of community facilities like that. But that can be very attractive for kind of meeting Arlington's kind of emergent needs for seniors.
Yeah.
There would have to be a small school, right? Because this is a fairly large apartment building. It's still only 450 kids. There's a reason I think they go with the charter. But as a parent, my first thought was, well, would I send a kid to a school like a building? But daycares are on the first floor of a high rise. That's a lot less kids, right? But still, it happens. It exists.
Alice Westfleet's 5 stories.
What's up?
The Alice Westfleet Elementary, one of our new schools, is 5 stories.
Thanks, Susan, for coming.
But I love seeing the stories. And Civic Builders actually did a lot of work with a long time ago. So part of what's interesting to see in that project is that's 15 years into an ecosystem that was having to share because things were constrained, and it wasn't pretty at the beginning. I can assure you. But you've got some experienced players like Jonathan Robinson and Enterprise, Civic Builders able to work together and figure out those counts.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Right, does anybody else?
Well, these are interesting projects and I appreciate all the information. Question for those of us who are still scratching the surface on ours. In terms of information gathering, is that all publicly available documentation that you found? Did you reach out to the sites?
Are you next month too?
Yeah, you guys seem to find, Steve and I did, so I'm curious what you did.
So ours had a lot more sort of laudatory pieces written about it. So that helps. I think something that I did, aside from just searching on various New York City and adjacent department websites, and even just saying site,
Yeah.
whatever the kind of address for the New York Department of Education is, and then the specific charter school or the specific project name. I also tended to search for the school or the project name and also financial statement or annual report. So those can be a bit more kind of difficult to parse, but they often contain very helpful information on not just the financial aspects, but also who owns the land. Is it leased, from whom and for how much? Was it transferred at some point?
Did you guys talk to people? Did you talk to folks there?
Oh, no, we didn't talk to anybody. At least I didn't.
The money, anything with money will be hard to find, especially if it's an older.
That's
Yeah.
what I was
This was
thinking.
fine.
And also you guys.
This was financed a long time.
Pretty good information.
I really think, to Wells's point, the reason we found so much is because there's a lot of architectural reviews that allowed in this place. So there's just a lot of interest amongst the architects.
I found a couple exactly like that for our project, but I didn't see these financials, but it talked about how innovative it was at the time for stormwater retention and.
And one thing I've noticed was, or did not notice, was I was hoping maybe there'd be a point of contact human,
Yeah.
where I would consider reaching out if I found an actual person. I didn't see any sign of an actual point of contact, looking at the publicly obvious stuff, so.
See, that would be interesting to just, if this project that's been, going for a while, just to get some just get a person's, some opinions about, pluses, minuses. Someone will be pretty upfront about that. 'Cause, that would be interesting.
Yeah, especially, talk about what challenges are you?
Exactly.
Right.
And what would you have done differently and what? Yeah.
For sure.
I found, it's kind of one link led to another link, led to another link. And there was one, AARP had a article about the senior center and the high school, which had a lot of information and pictures, and there was architecture stuff. And Kurt, you found the blue,
Plan.
yeah, the building plan. Information about the frontal citizens.
Contentious building school, I can't imagine.
I think because it's a small city. Generally, there's only one of everything, so it's it's online because that is how that's how it comes up in public discussion and town council meetings, that sort of stuff. And there's DC is much larger, there's bigger budget, multiple community centers, so it's not, there's not as much of a unique focus on something because there are many high schools, many community centers, whatever it is.
And also the town website was helpful to go to. That's where I found the demographic information and that projections, which I thought was relevant.
Well, yeah, maybe that town meeting model that you should see it, but help,
Yeah, I think it being a small town too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's sort of one link led to another link, and so oftentimes in articles, there's another link, and then you could put on that, and it leads to another one.
I mean, the other random thought that pops in my head, and you probably already did this, but I assume there's some kind of general literature on this topic, and there might be a couple of good kind of overview articles out there, some literature that talk about this. And some tidbits.
I can share, thanks Sandy. I'm happy to share a couple that a couple that I found in the beginning when I started doing the research on, trying to find some places like to look at.
Yeah.
There were, there's a lot of literature. Not a lot, but I found a couple of links on joint use agreements and community schools, which I, and on kind of some joint use, and another one that gave me a couple of these projects. So I'll share this with everybody. I'll keep you guys email list till the next meeting. Share those links.
Nothing I might suggest, Steve, right? If you find the design firms that design the facilities, it's very likely that that firm specializes in that scope of work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they're like an urban planning firm. So if you, just like Stacy said, if you follow the link and get to their site, it might be able to happen upon more process that they've gone through, other examples that firm has taken part in.
Like I know you had the link, it actually was the.
Yeah.
Have we thought to look at municipalities that resemble Arlington, like in size, demographics, kind of locating? Just because I'm from Miami. There's a town called Coral Gables that's really similar to how we feel, in the sense it's a suburb that's right by the city and it has public transportation. I'm curious. Yeah. I'm gonna look to see if they have anything that's mixed use. I think it would be very comparable to the size of it's kind of, or as the kids say, vibes.
Isn't that bigger? Is that bigger or no?
Now it is just so.
Yeah.
It's a Florida.
Isn't it growing like crazy?
Yeah, but 10 years ago. 200,000, 300,000, probably a lot more now.
That's University of Miami, right?
I think doing kind of another step of these researches, I think would be a really interesting and valuable use of our time if we could do it in a more targeted way, like where you are actually choosing instead of me giving you the one, research this. Like here, research this. You're actually finding a place that you think is, we tried to find places that had some relevance to Arlington, either in that they were responding to changing demographics, or that they were land constrained, or that, kind of the, in some, but it was, this was sort of the first step.
I enjoy it.
And I know you've looked at it, and I know that it's probably going to be more difficult to find, but what are the governing agreements that the various entities were able to put in place? Like the New York is a great example, because there's so many players. So they create special purpose vehicles, like how did they achieve the legal entities that they use to execute and manage these projects? Because when I think about the way we work,
Right.
that's one of the things we would have to, schools and county would have, like when you mentioned like the trade center, as you know, there are 7 to 8 different departments on that site, and which we would all have to figure out. Of course, it's owned by the county and it's owned by APS. So, but I do wonder, like when I put that in presentations, of course, being in the system, I kind of sometimes the wheels are spinning. what kind of MOUs were signed here? What kind of governing the
That's
process?
one of the interesting, I mean, that was something that I was very interested in when I first started looking at these projects, because one of the things that I was looking at was that some jurisdictions actually have joint use agreements.
Yes.
And it's, instead of having an MOU for individual facilities, it is a joint use agreement, which is something that JFAC, that's kind of what, we were established to create, in a sense, not necessarily that exactly, but I think finding examples of that, and that's sort of what I'm fishing for with how, were there things put in place, and I think there is something in place there.
That we're working on diligently now.
Happy Thanksgiving.
I will check. Just send her an email.
It's funny, it came to mind just today when I was working on. I took down the tree. It's marginally related, but in the system, this is like every day for us. So we just put the underground vaults, Padu, and which is owned by the county. Of course, we built that street there. But I have to take down the tree that was dead, and of course, I have to replace it with 2 trees. So I'm looking around my site, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got plants here. Then all of a sudden, the bell goes off in my head. I'm like, no, I can't touch that entire half of the site because there's an underground vault on it. And I could, but I would have to give them yes, I have to get permission because we have an agreement that says anything that's going to go below 12 inches in the ground, we need to get clearance with them before we touch the site and all of it. So, that's kind of the wheels were spinning. So I said, all right, fine. I'm not going to bother with that. Let me look for applications. So that's kind of just an example of like, when you really want to execute these agreements, there always are these governing conditions or whatever here, that helps the group know that this is like
There's an agreement that is consistent and known and clear, and it could help it can help, make your job go by easier, and time, not take as much. And one thing that John Chadwick used to always talk about was that, time is money. So if it takes 5 years to complete a project as opposed to 4, that's millions and millions of dollars. And if you haven't looking at operating with shortfalls. And so if we're looking for efficiencies, can we find efficiencies operations, within sort of this, so that would be ongoing and kind of structural in nature that just make everything clear and benefit the community and benefit everybody. But
yeah, I see that. And actually, your committee, I really appreciate it because I don't remember when I came in there over a decade ago. I found out that we have 2 autonomous governing bodies. And, I understand why we have that. But just like you all are trying to do, there is a symbolic, there's a connection that we cannot break. Something to appreciate what you all are doing. We kind of it looks like sometime in the past, we worked much closer together. That's like county government. And at some, I guess as there's turnover, that wanes and it comes back together. So I appreciate what you're saying, Stacey, because if there's a joint agreement that applies regardless who is in office or who's on the boards, that these are the governing principles whenever these 2 bodies need to interact and work on the project. That could help both things forward that we've been talking about for many years. So that's a great direction.
Thank you. Right, I guess we're finished with the main part of our meeting. Do we have anyone, for public comment? Seeing none. Thank you again to Steve and Wells. Just another recognition for all that you have both contributed to this commission. It's very valuable and it's not always appreciated by other people outside of this group. But I appreciate it. I see it, I hear it, and thank you very much for everything.
Thanks, Stacy. Yeah, good luck to you too, guys.
Had a good start.
Okay, thanks.
Hey.